The next god form in the Trimurti is Shiva. And I suppose we could go to Vishnu next, but Shiva is, unlike Brahma, one of the most commonly worshipped gods in Hinduism. And as you'll see, Shiva will be worshipped in many different ways, has many different forms, different aspects, and I think it's kind of fascinating. So Shiva has, as you can see here, is usually presented in the form of a holy man, an older man. It's not obvious from this, but the fact that he's not wearing much clothing is usually the sign that he's renounced aspects of his physical life. So he represents something more psychic, more spiritual. The cobras coming out of his head, it's interesting. He's the god of destruction. That represents both the fact that he has the ability to destroy and kill, but also that he can hold it back, that he can hold back those forces. And so he's both a force of destruction and a force of protection. If you look carefully at the broader sense in which he's depicted, the Nataraj, the picture on the right, is a very common depiction of Shiva in a form of cosmic dance. And you see in both depictions, again, his gender, while male, is also slightly androgynous. He's sort of gender bended. And the gray and blue color that he has is usually a sign of ash. And so you'll see older men when they are in the sannyasin phase, which is the last phase of life. Sannyasin means to renounce. So these sannyasins will literally take off all their clothes and smear themselves with ash. And so he is, in some ways, showing that death of the physical body, literally dying to your body to get to a higher spiritual state. The other two symbols here that are extremely important, the tiger skin represents his physical drive, so lust, anger, the emotions like that, and the fact that sometimes you see him lying on a tiger or wearing a tiger skin. That's the symbol that he has control over his emotional state, that he's able to manage it. You can see he's also sitting on an animal skin below him there too. The other two symbols that are going to be very, very important is going to be the three-pronged trident, which not only symbolizes his ability to give out punishment for evildoers, but also it represents the creative, preservative, and destructive functions of the triad. So it is the Trimurti. So there it is. He also carries a drum. That drum is like the mala beads that you saw with Brahma, is a symbol of time. So you see there's a little thing hanging there. It looks like it's usually on a cord, and it basically is like a heartbeat. It goes boom, 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 as it goes side to side. And that is a sign of time, the sign of destruction that time brings. So you'll see he's also the Lord of sleep, that deep sleep that we hopefully can get in the middle of the night where you leave your body entirely. So he's there to destroy yourself, because large parts of yourself are not particularly helpful. So a lot of times when we think of destruction as a bad thing, but frequently Shiva is there to destroy lower parts of self, or to destroy enemies, things that are threatening to us. I'm not going to go into all of this, but just to show you how complex the iconography is, the serpents behind the head, this idea that he's holding back forces of destruction, the drum in his hand, as we saw before. You'll notice that the mudras here, the hand positions, are very, very important. And you'll notice here that the flame is also very important. So the flame of cremation and the flame of destruction is very much at the center of Shiva's iconography or symbolism. You'll notice also he's standing on a dwarf here. The dwarf is usually that lower avidya, ignorance, the part of yourself that doesn't really want to wake up. Shiva's there to remind you need to step on that part of yourself and get to a higher place. So we could go through all of this. Some of these things you've already seen. In this case, the lion skin, the tiger skin that he was wearing. Those both represent the same thing. We've talked about some of these things. the cobra being a sign of potential energy also is interesting. Here you'll see his connection to the Ganges River. It's spouting out of his head. And the Ganges River, again, is a source of creation. You see going into the Om there. So a lot of different things. The crescent third eye is typical of Shiva. So if you look up between his eyebrows, you see a sort of slit moving vertically. That's also a sign of Shiva. Other forms of Shiva. One of the most interesting ones is the lingam. This is this idea of kind of a unified element. The lingam is literally a phallic symbol, meaning it's symbolizing not so much a literal penis, but more the generative power of the universe. It's much more primal than that. And so if you look over at the upper right, you'll see that the lingam is embedded in a yoni, and a yoni is a vaginal form. And so that's kind of the cosmic form of creation. And what's fascinating about this, when I went to a temple in southern India, I was watching women praying to a Shiva lingam. And the symbolism of that was that they were praying for fertility. They were praying for children. And so it's an interesting element. So you see many different forms of lingams, small lingams that can be in the form of small rocks. Frequently you'll see a lingam like the one on the right with the 3 stripes. Again, that sort of 3 element of Shiva. And also this is designed to have oil in it. So this would be lit on fire. So it has this kind of very primal element to it. So you go from a very abstract version of Shiva to a much more playful one. Now, Ganesh is one of the most popular god forms in all of India. And if you go to Indian restaurants or you go to an Indian person's house, frequently you'll see Ganesh. Ganesh is a destroyer of obstacles. So there's a much more iconography behind him, but we'll just get from some of the simplest parts of it. This idea that he's associated with learning and literature, you're going to say, wait a second, Sarasvati, who was the consort of Brahma, was associated with learning and literature. But in Hinduism, it's always non-dualistic. It's not this, it's not that, it's neti-neti. So Shiva is the one that gets you over the things that make it hard for you to learn. Ganesh, Shiva in the form of Ganesh, helps you get over those things, the difficulties that you have. And so again, anytime you begin a new project or you have a new business or any of these sorts of things, Ganesh is called upon to give his help. So Ganesh has many different elements to him. Just to give you some idea, right? The small eyes for concentration, the big ears for listening. He has a mouse as his consort, which is interesting too. A little bit that the mouse is sort of the troublemaker, and so he rides him and keeps him under control. Other elements of Shiva. Shiva has a consort named Shakti. Shakti literally means energy. So the energy in the body, that kind of intensity in the body that you feel when you work out, that's Shakti. And so you'll see her, you know that she's connected to Shiva because she has the trident. She also has a conch shell there in that left hand, which is a symbol that comes from Vishnu, which is interesting. But you see she's also riding a tiger. She has a limp lotus flower, right? It's a sign of destruction. And as you can see, Shakti is the female side of the gentler side of Shiva. There are other female elements of Shiva too, not just Shakti. There's also Parvati. Parvati is more like the more traditionally feminine, a little bit more passive, more domesticated. Parvati is frequently worshipped by women who are in the householder phase, meaning they're working at home. So she is very much not only a female god form, but one that is worshipped by women. But to contrast with Parvati, you get this. You get Kali. And this is really amazing because in some ways, Hindu culture doesn't give women power in the social area. They're not part of the caste system and they're oppressed in that way. But what you do find in Hinduism is extremely powerful forms of the female divine, which you just don't see in Western religions at all. And so this form, you can see she's so powerful. Over on the right, she's even subdued Shiva himself. So the heads there represent the, again, this is weird because you'll see in India women literally offering their children as forms of sacrifice, not like human sacrifice, but literally giving themselves over in front of statues of Kali to try and encourage Kali to take the sort of the lower parts of the child out of them in a way. So this idea of fearlessness is really, I think, the best example of it. It's just you're trying to overcome the things that are holding you back. So again, the foot on Shiva, which is frequently there. The severed hands are the force of karma, so she's able to overcome the force of action in primal ways. And again, the black is the primordial force. So she represents this incredibly powerful, destructive and creative force. So she is the goddess of time and the goddess of change and the feminine aspect of Shiva. But as you can see, you have a very powerful destructive element in Kali. You have a gentler version in Parvati, and then you have the energy version here in Shakti. And of course, just to make it even more complicated, you have multiple different representations of each of these. So you'll see different manifestations of Shakti. Usually Kali just looks like this. But again, all of these things are elements of Shiva. And that is important to remember because in Hinduism, every force and every god has almost an infinite number of ways of being depicted.